Ambassador Nikki Haley, thank you for speaking with us here in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the district.
We're thrilled to be here.
All right, so let's take a look at crime. Crime has been a huge concern in a lot of America's major cities, including here in Washington, D.C., also Baltimore, Seattle. If you are elected president, how would you help address violent crime that we're seeing in Fairfax County, Virginia, to here in Washington, D.C.?
It's across the country. I mean, people are worried about letting their children ride their bikes down the street. They're worried about getting carjacked going to a restaurant. It's a problem. The first thing we need to do is not just say we support law enforcement, but act on it. We need to stop any conversations of defund the police. We need to make sure our prosecutors are prosecuting according to the law. And we need to make sure our judges are holding people accountable. What we're seeing right now, law enforcement is demoralized because what happens is they sacrifice their lives to go and arrest people who are breaking the law. And there's nothing worse than them seeing them walk right back out on the streets the next day. The second thing is we need to defund sanctuary cities. All of this lawlessness is coming in because if you break the law to come into the country, you're going to break the law when you are in this country. And just bringing law and order back, those things matter. And so when we start allowing these prosecutions to go through and hold people accountable, we defund sanctuary cities and we secure the border, we'll start to see things get a lot better.
Looking at immigration and crime, just here in the district, Maryland and Northern Virginia, we've seen 3 high-profile crimes, violent crimes, perpetrated by people who are in the country illegally. For instance, there is a situation where officials arrested a man who was involved in a shooting that led to the death of a 2-year-old. We also saw a man steal a tow truck, ramming to police cars, really anybody who got in their way for an hour on the roads. And we also saw a man who, there was a standoff with police here in Washington, D.C., led to him shooting 3 different police officers of MPD. So we are seeing crime perpetrated by people in this country illegally. Do you think if people are in this country illegally, they commit crime, should they be deported?
Absolutely. We have to make sure we take this seriously. When I was governor, we passed the toughest illegal immigration law in the country. President Obama sued us over it and we won. Right now we have a completely open border. What we need to do is take what I did in South Carolina and go national with it. Do a national E-Verify program where businesses have to prove that the people they hire are in this country legally. We need to defund sanctuary cities. We need to put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. We need to go back to the Remain in Mexico policy so that no one steps foot on U.S. soil. And instead of catch and release, we need to go to catch and deport. That's the only way to stop it. The resources that are being used in schools, in hospitals, through law enforcement, just to manage these illegal immigrants is too much. Taxpayers can't continue to pay for this. And so we need to remember, my parents came here legally. They put in the time, they put in the price. My mom always says if they don't follow the law to come here, they're not going to follow the law when they live here. We have to make sure we deport and stop incentivizing people to come.
When it comes to fentanyl, Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, really across the country, they've seen fentanyl pour into their states, their jurisdictions, killing people, killing children. For instance, we have seen in Loudoun County, Virginia, several student overdoses, some fatal, some non-fatal. And we know there the superintendent late last year knew about these student overdoses for weeks, didn't tell the public. Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia said, you know what, we're going to sign an executive order to require schools to notify whenever a juvenile overdose occurs within 24 hours of a school-connected overdose. And he's getting a lot of bipartisan support for that in the Democratic-controlled legislature in Virginia. Would you like to see that maybe become a federal law to require schools to say, hey, there was an overdose at school today. We want you to check the backpacks of your kids to make sure they're not ingesting something that's potentially lethal.
It's a crisis. We had more fentanyl come across the border last year that would kill every single American. #1 cause of death for adults 18 to 45, fentanyl. And don't think for a second China doesn't know what they're doing when they send it over. But when this happens in a school, the reason that parents need to know this, the reason that families need to know this, is because a lot of times this can be from someone who gets Ritalin online, or someone who gets another medicine online for a class, if they share it with students, it puts everybody in danger. It allows parents to have a conversation with their kids, remind them not to take these pills from anybody else, and also remind them that if they don't get it from a physician and a pharmacist, you have to be careful that it could be laced with it. So yes, we have got to take that seriously. And the other side of that is, we saw Joe Biden and Donald Trump at the border yesterday. Both of those were photo ops, and frustrating because Joe Biden has had years to take care of this and he's only made it worse. But Donald Trump, on top of that, when Congress had the chance a couple weeks ago to pass a bill on the border, what'd he do? He said, don't pass anything until after the general election because it would hurt him. We can't wait one more day. That bill wasn't strong enough, but Congress needed to get in a room and continue to work on it until they passed a strong border bill. We can't wait on this. This is a dangerous situation, whether it's fentanyl, whether it's crime, whether it's the resources it's stealing from us. We've got to close the border.
In Virginia, education became a huge issue in 2021, leading, some would say, to Governor Glenn Youngkin's success that election. A lot of parents spoke out at school board meetings in Loudoun County. That was known as ground zero for the parents' rights movement. I know that a lot of what happens in schools are dictated, what happens at the local level and state level. But what do you have to say to parents who are looking at this presidential election? Do you see yourself being more of an advocate for parents than, let's say, the current president or your opponent? We have
to advocate for our kids. Only 31% of 8th graders in our country are proficient in reading. Only 27% of 8th graders in our country are proficient in math. If we don't do something quick, we're going to be in a world of hurt 10 years from now. Joe Biden has our schools focusing more on gender pronouns than whether they can read them. We've got to go back to the basics. Reading, math, science, history, those are the things we need to focus on. And that's why I'll take as many federal programs as we can and send them down to the state level. Think education, think healthcare, think welfare, think mental health. When we cut the strings and send those resources down, not only do we reduce the size of the federal government, but you empower people on the ground, including parents, to decide how those resources are done. That way we're not having Washington bureaucrats make these decisions. It was nothing worse than to see parents who were being investigated just for advocating for their children. We want parents to have as much control over their children's education as possible. I will make sure that everything is transparent. Parents shouldn't wonder what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. Every syllabus will be online. Everything they need to know will be online. The resources will be more local, and parents will have the ability to choose which schools their child goes to. That's what would happen under a Haley presidency.
And you mentioned gender pronouns. That has been a big debate across a lot of our school divisions. For instance, this week, there's a policy that discusses how teachers need to address students. In Loudoun County, Virginia, for instance, they require teachers to address students by their preferred gender pronouns. And then we saw this week at Loudoun County School Board meeting something really unique we haven't seen before. There's members of Loudoun County's Muslim communities, Hindu communities, Christian communities coming together, asking their school board to stop allowing students to use bathrooms and locker rooms of their choice based on gender identity, not biological sex at birth. Like I said earlier, I know that you might have limitations as president on dictating what schools can and cannot do, but what's your opinion on this? I'm sure a lot of parents would love to know.
These decisions need to be as local as possible. Parents need to have their voices heard. It's very, very important. What you have right now, and then even teachers need to have their voices heard. The second we start listening to teachers in the classroom and parents who are wanting their kids to be educated, that's when we will fix education. Right now, teachers have to be the pastor, they have to be the nurse, they have to be the guidance counselor, they have to be the teacher, and oh, by the way, they have to teach to a test. And now you're going to tell them they have to worry about these gender pronouns, and you're wanting to hide that from parents? We can't have that. We need more transparency in education, not less. And we need to keep our kids focused on the basics. But you don't need to get into all of these things that confuse kids. Right now, we're seeing more anxiety, stress, and depression than we've seen in a long time. If you look at what we're allowing to have happen, that's why. Let's take all of that out and focus on making sure our kids can read, do math, and get a job. That's the biggest focus we should have going forward in the future.
do you support, back to this issue, do you support school districts allowing students to use the bathrooms and locker rooms of their choice at school?
No, because we need to make sure students are safe. What we did in South Carolina is boys went into boys' bathrooms, girls went into girls' bathrooms, and anyone else could use a private bathroom if they needed to. That way the rest of the student population didn't feel it. That's what we have to go back to. You can't go and just disrupt a massive group of kids because one might feel uncomfortable or two might have an issue. We have to start getting some order back into our schools and letting them know they can relax. I was with a senior not too long ago, and she said she felt like every class she went into talked about gender pronouns and, you know, whether biological boys should play in girls' sports. That is not things that our kids need to be worried about. You know, we shouldn't be focused on that. First of all, I think strong girls become strong women. Strong women become strong leaders. None of that happens if you have biological boys playing in girls' sports. None of that happens if you go and you're allowing anyone to go into any bathroom the way they want. We have to go back and start focusing on safety, on education, and on what we're going to do to grow our kids, not distract our kids.
With the time we have left with you, I want to ask you about the economy. The cost of living is soaring in so many communities across Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and so many other communities in America. How would you help Americans' paychecks go farther, and how would you help reduce the cost of living?
Well, first of all, that's why we need an accountant in the White House. That's what I can bring to the White House. But more than that, I think, look at the differences between me and Donald Trump. Donald Trump put us $8 trillion in debt in just 4 years. He says that was COVID. That was less than 20%. I want to start paying down our debt. He grew government. I want to reduce the size of government. He didn't clean out our agencies. I want to clean out our agencies and get them mission focused. And all the Republicans have followed suit with all this wasteful spending. We want to make sure we stop the spending, stop the borrowing, eliminate their pet projects that they open back up, and I'll veto any spending bill that doesn't go back to pre-COVID levels. And then we'll take those federal programs and send them down to the states so we can reduce the size of the federal government. We want to cut taxes on the middle class so that they can breathe. We want to make sure that we eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax in this country, and we want small business tax cuts to be permanent. Those are the things we need to focus on to get our economy moving again. You can't continue to grow government and act like it's going to go away. Right now we're $34 trillion in debt. We're having to borrow money just to make our interest payments. China owns some of that debt. And for the first time, we're paying more in interest payments than we are in our defense budget. You know who notices that? Russia, China, and Iran. It's a national security issue. We've got to start getting fiscally responsible again.
Finally, anything else you'd like to add? I know we touched on a lot of different topics. You're going into Super Tuesday. I know Virginia's important to your campaign. Anything else you'd like to add?
You know what I'll say is this is the decision between, do you want more of the same or do you want to go in a new direction? More of the same has been bloated government, wasteful spending, isolationism when it comes to national security, and anger and division. Something new is the fact we go back to being fiscally responsible. We go back to peace through strength. We go back to the fact that we can strongly disagree and not hate each other over it. And we go back to a government that works for the people instead of the people working for government. That's what we could have. In a general election, you're given a choice. In a primary, you make your choice. I hope everybody will go out and use this opportunity and blessing that we have in America to go make their choice on Tuesday.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.